Laura's fingertips brushed the official county seal embossed on the first document, her voice cool and unassailable, layered with the quiet confidence of someone holding every piece of legal evidence. You did pay the initial down payment before our marriage, but 5 years into our union, your startup suffered a catastrophic capital chain collapse. You were completely unable to cover the exorbitant monthly mortgage payments, which ran close to $12,000 each month. I used my own personal premarital assets, entirely my independent wealth accumulated during my banking years, to pay off the remaining $2 million mortgage in full, clearing the property of all debt overnight. You begged me for help back then, on your knees in this very penthouse. You swore we would amend the deed to list us as equal co-owners the second the company turned a consistent profit. But once you were safe and successful again, you conveniently broke your promise and refused to schedule a single meeting with our real estate attorney to update the title. The law, however, does not recognize empty verbal promises. It recognizes hard, tangible evidence. I possess complete bank wire records for the full mortgage payoff, signed handwritten transfer receipts, a personal debt acknowledgement handwritten and signed by you, and a legally recorded equity supplementary agreement for the property. Every document is notarized, lawyer-witnessed, and fully compliant with Massachusetts state real estate and marital statutes. Under the property and marital statutes of this Commonwealth, I hold full legal right of disposal over this residence. You are merely the nominal owner listed on paper. I am the actual legal beneficiary and sole equitable equity holder of the home. Every statement aligned perfectly with local legal code, leaving zero room for argument, denial, or rebuttal. Derek's body jolted violently, his face turning deathly pale as cold sweat prickled across his forehead and upper lip. He remembered that crisis vividly, every desperate detail etched into the back of his mind. He remembered his company teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, the crushing monthly mortgage payments he could not cover, the helpless panic that had consumed him day and night. He remembered Laura single-handedly bailing him out with a massive lump sum of money, saving his home, his company, and his entire social reputation in one single transaction. Yet over the years, he had deliberately erased that memory entirely from his mind. He only saw the penthouse as his personal achievement, only saw Laura as an unemployed housewife living passively off his hard-earned success. Margaret's mind reeled in blind terror, yet she still clung to stubborn, self-serving denial, shouting frantically over the murmuring crowd. Even if you paid the mortgage, that's just marital spousal support, plain and simple. You're only entitled to tiny monthly compensation for the money you put in. You cannot seize and sell the entire house out from under us. Compensation. Laura let out a cold, humorless laugh that held no trace of amusement. After 10 years of unbroken marriage, I have never wanted pitiful, meager handouts from you people. I only want every right and every asset that has always, fundamentally belonged to me long before I ever met Derek. She lifted the second document higher, holding it out so both mother and son could read the bold printed corporate letterhead, her voice dropping to a sharp, decisive tone that unleashed a second, devastating storm of revelation. Second, just now, acting in my capacity as the company's largest natural beneficial shareholder, I have formally removed you, Derek Bennett, from all positions as CEO and Executive Director of Future Tech Innovations. The dismissal resolution is filed with the State Secretary's office and effective immediately, in full compliance with corporate bylaws and Massachusetts state business law. The crowd fell utterly, deathly silent. Every whisper, every rustle of clothing, every shallow breath ceased entirely. Every pair of eyes locked onto the poised, powerful middle-aged woman standing atop the courthouse stone steps, radiating a quiet, unshakable authority no onlooker had ever suspected she possessed. Derek froze rigid where he stood, his blood turning to ice in his veins. His mind went blank, ringing with disorienting static, unable to fully process the damning words he had just heard spoken aloud. Future Tech Innovations was his company, his decade-long life's work, his sole source of fame, wealth, social status, and pride. He was the public founder, the face of the startup, the undisputed leader in everyone's eyes. How could a stay-at-home wife, who had never once sat in a company board meeting, who never touched daily operational work, strip him of all his executive power with a single, binding legal declaration. You're lying through your teeth. Derek's voice cracked, turning raw and frantic, his eyes blazing with desperate, defensive rage. I founded this company from scratch. I hold the controlling equity shares. I run every single daily operation. You don't even have a registered shareholder account with our transfer agent. You have no legal right to remove me from my own business. Margaret descended into uncontrolled hysterics, her face contorted with a twisted mix of rage and paralyzing fear. She waved her hands wildly toward the nearby uniformed court bailiff, screaming at the top of her lungs. She's lost her mind completely. This is extortion, grand theft, corporate fraud. I'm calling the police this instant. This woman is trying to steal my son's life's work right out from under him. Laura remained completely unfazed by their wild, unhinged outbursts. She unfolded the thick stack of corporate equity filings and official signed board resolution, holding the printed documents out for them to examine. Crisp black legal text, embossed official corporate seals, verified state business registration tracking numbers, irrefutable and unchallengeable in every legal capacity. Future Tech Innovations was launched with a starting capital of $3 million USD. Every single dollar of seed funding, every angel investment round, every Series A venture capital injection originated entirely from my personal overseas investment trust accounts, established long before I married Derek. 10 years ago, you had nothing but an untested, half-baked business idea, Derek. No startup capital, no established industry connections, no functional operational resources, no access to venture capital networks. I stayed entirely behind the scenes, using vetted third-party nominee shareholders to build your core company team, inject massive rounds of capital, and connect you to top-tier national and international industry channels. I single-handedly built the entire financial and operational foundation of your business from absolute zero. Laura recounted the decade-long hidden truth steadily and evenly, laying bare the invisible reality that had sustained Derek's fake success for every single year of their marriage. I chose equity nominee holding solely to preserve your fragile male pride, a pride you prioritized over every sacrifice I made. I let you stand unchallenged in the spotlight, take every ounce of public credit, and enjoy all the social glory while I remained invisible, quiet, and unrecognized behind closed doors. Every share of corporate equity registered under your name these past 10 years has been held in legal trust exclusively for me. You were nothing more than a carefully presented figurehead CEO paraded for investors, clients, and social acquaintances. I have always been the true capital controller, the sole beneficial owner behind this entire company. A violent, visible shudder ripped through Derek's entire frame. His knees buckled hard, and he nearly collapsed forward onto the rough stone courthouse steps. Cold sweat soaked through the expensive Italian custom suit he had purchased with company bonus funds within an instant. Every shred of his carefully cultivated pride, arrogant self-righteousness, and inflated ego shattering completely into worthless dust. In that horrifying, crystal-clear moment of reckoning, every confusing, unexplained detail of his professional life finally made unescapable sense. All those times his company had teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, yet somehow pulled through with unexplained seven-figure investment infusions. All those powerful industry giants who treated him with stiff, polite distance instead of genuine professional respect. All those impossible, high-value business deals that effortlessly fell into his lap without months of grueling, cold outreach and negotiation. None of it stemmed from his personal talent. None of it was blind good fortune. It was Laura, always Laura, quietly bailing him out of disaster, quietly propping up every fragment of his fabricated successful life. And he had repaid her decade of silent, selfless devotion with years of cold emotional neglect, had allowed his mother to bully and belittle her relentlessly on a daily basis, had dismissed every one of her massive sacrifices as trivial and insignificant, and had openly mocked her for being disconnected from the real working world. Margaret stood stock-still on the pavement, her mind completely broken and unable to process the documents spread out before her eyes. A lifelong materialistic snob who worshipped money, social clout, and surface-level prestige above all else, who had spent 10 straight years sneering at her daughter-in-law as a useless, financially dependent housewife, now watched her entire core worldview crumble to ash beneath her feet. All her unearned superiority, all her constant arrogance, all her endless bragging rights over neighborhood friends vanished in a single heartbeat. This is no fairy tale of sudden miracles, but a middle-aged woman's long-overdue awakening and legal reckoning. At 42, there were no youthful privileges, no sudden God-given opportunities, only a decade of suppressed endurance chipped away by a loveless marriage, endless exploitation at the hands of her in-laws, and a decade of heartfelt devotion ignored by a mama's boy husband. The protagonist, Laura Bennett, did not grow powerful overnight. She simply set aside the gentleness she'd clung to for the sake of love and unleashed a decade's worth of carefully laid plans, capital reserves, and legal leverage to reclaim everything that rightfully belonged to her. This story is rooted in unflinching realism, fully legally compliant, and logically airtight. No fantasy tropes, no random powerful benefactors, no forced plot conveniences. Every act of revenge, counterattack, and ultimate turnaround is grounded in real estate property laws, corporate equity structures, company bylaws, board dismissal statutes, and marital asset protection mechanisms. Crafted exclusively for mature Western readers aged 40 to 65, it delves into universal struggles, marital oppression, toxic mother-in-law bullying, the suffocating dynamic of a mama's boy marriage, the devaluation of full-time homemakers, the crisis of middle-aged women, and female self-rescue through legal and financial power. Packed with high-stakes confrontations and cathartic payoffs, the story ends with unapologetic independence, no remarriage, no foolish emotional regression, only pure self-rebirth. A fine early autumn rain lingered over the city of Boston, cool gusts of wind sweeping fallen plane tree leaves across the cold marble steps of the Superior Court. After 6 grueling months of divorce litigation, the final judgment had finally been handed down. The judge's solemn, steady voice echoed through the empty courthouse corridor. The marital relationship between the plaintiff and defendant is irretrievably broken. Divorce is hereby granted. The plaintiff, Laura Bennett, voluntarily waives partial household labor compensation and emotional distress damages. There are no minor child custody disputes. This is a final, enforceable judgment, effective immediately. The moment the courthouse doors swung open, the quiet of the judicial hall shattered into bustling noise. Laura stepped outside, dressed in a sleek, minimalist black tailored suit, her dark hair pulled back in a flawless, tight bun. There was no trace of the grief, exhaustion, or despair people expected from a newly divorced woman. Her face held only the calm detachment of someone who had endured 10 years of quiet suffering and finally stepped free of it. 42 years old. For a full decade, she had played the role of the docile, selfless, devoted wife everyone admired. She had walked away from a thriving career in investment banking, retreated entirely into domestic life, cooked every meal, managed every household affair, tended to her in-laws' daily needs, and single-handedly supported her husband's entrepreneurial rise. To the outside world, she was a dependent housewife, a delicate flower clinging to her husband's success. To her husband and her mother-in-law, she was nothing more than a free, disposable live-in maid. Everyone believed that without her husband, Derek Bennett, she had nothing. No career, no money, no connections, no way to survive on her own. Derek believed it. His venomous, domineering mother, Margaret Bennett, believed it wholeheartedly too. A black luxury sedan pulled to a stop at the bottom of the steps. The window rolled down, revealing Margaret's wrinkled, scowling face. Before Laura could even descend the steps, the older woman threw open the car door and blocked her path, her shrill voice splattering with contempt. "You're divorced now, so get lost. Don't you dare loiter here and embarrass us." Margaret craned her neck to glare at Laura, who stood half a head taller, her eyes brimming with unmasked disdain, as if she were sweeping away a piece of worthless trash. "For 10 years you've eaten our food, worn our clothes, lived off my son's hard work. Finally, you're out of our house. Let me make this clear. From today forward, our home, our money, everything belonging to the Bennett family has absolutely nothing to do with you." Passers-by and other courthouse visitors paused to stare, quiet murmurs rippling through the crowd. Most sighed sympathetically, assuming this was yet another tragic story of a woman drained dry by her marriage, cast out with nothing after decades of sacrifice. Derek stepped out of the courthouse right behind her. Sharply dressed in an expensive custom suit, handsome and polished, the CEO of a thriving tech startup, he carried every ounce of societal prestige and professional success. He paused halfway down the steps, his expression cold and distant, not a single word of defense for his wife. Instead, his brows furrowed with obvious impatience. He was the textbook definition of a mama's boy, a man who had spent their entire marriage treating his mother's every word as gospel, who had always demanded Laura yield and compromise, who had dismissed every one of her grievances as petty overreaction. "Laura, just listen to my mother," Derek said, his tone frigid and devoid of any lingering affection. "Now that the divorce is finalized, leave with what little dignity you have. This house was purchased by my family before marriage, and I've covered every mortgage payment alone. Everything in this household is earned by me. You've spent 10 years sitting at home, contributing nothing of value. Leaving with nothing is the best possible outcome for you." His words were calm on the surface, yet every syllable sliced like a blade, erasing every late night of labor, every financial sacrifice, every emotional compromise Laura had poured into their marriage and his career. Emboldened by her son's indifference, Margaret lunged forward, raising her hand to shove Laura, her movements rough and unbridled. "Grab your pathetic little belongings and get out. I don't want to see your face in that 3,000-square-foot riverfront penthouse 1 second longer. That's my son's home, his legacy. You're nothing but an outsider with no right to stay." 10 years of suppressed hurt, endless compromise, and silent grievance settled over Laura in that moment, no longer burning, no longer agonizing, just cold, unshakable resolve. She lifted her gaze, her dark eyes completely devoid of anger or sorrow, looking down at the raging older woman with the quiet superiority of someone watching an ant scramble. She lifted a hand, gently blocking Margaret's shoving arm. Her grip was not violent, but firm, unyielding, locking the older woman's wrist in place instantly. "This is my home. I decide when I leave, not you." Laura's voice was low and calm, yet it cut through Margaret's shrill shouting like steel, silencing the entire crowd in an instant. Margaret froze for a split second before yanking her wrist free, cackling with disbelieving malice. "Your home? Have you lost your mind, Laura? That property is under my son's name. Every penny of the down payment and mortgage came from our family. You have zero claim to it. You're delusional." Derek's frown deepened, his tone sharp with ridicule. "Don't be ridiculous, Laura. You voluntarily waived all property division rights in court. It's far too late for childish regret. Save yourself the embarrassment." In their arrogant, narrow-minded view, Laura's sudden pushback was nothing more than the pathetic last tantrum of a defeated woman. Without hurry or fanfare, Laura reached into her sleek black leather handbag and pulled out 2 official stamped legal documents, their bright red county government seals crisp and authoritative, carrying unassailable legal weight under state property code. She did not shout, did not gloat, did not revel in the moment's chaos. She simply laid out the unvarnished truth in clear, unwavering tones, every word landing like a sledgehammer on the Bennett mother and son. "First, that riverfront penthouse in downtown Boston no longer belongs to your family, nor does it belong to you, Derek." Her eyes remained steady, her tone flat and unemotional. "The second the divorce judgment took effect 10 minutes ago, I completed the full title transfer and closed the sale of the property. I've sold my house." The single sentence detonated like a thunderclap on the courthouse stone steps. Margaret's mocking smile froze completely on her lined face, her pupils blowing wide with pure, stunned disbelief. Her knees wobbled beneath her weight, and she grabbed the side of her sedan for balance. "What did you say? How dare you sell my son's house? This is outright insanity." Derek's face drained of all color in an instant, a cold wave of dread crashing violently over his chest. His throat went tight, and he took an involuntary step backward. "Laura, this is forgery. Fraud. That property is legally registered to my name. You hold no legal authority to sell it whatsoever." Their entire worldview was built on one unshakable assumption. The penthouse was Derek's premarital separate property, registered solely in his name, and Laura had no legal right to touch it whatsoever. They had spent years bragging to friends and distant relatives about the lavish home Derek had provided for his wife, blind to the reality hidden beneath the paperwork. Laura's cold, unyielding gaze swept slowly over their ashen, devastated faces, delivering another crushing wave of undeniable, legally binding truth. Article 17 of the Future Tech Innovations Corporate Bylaws clearly stipulates the company's primary beneficial investor and hidden trust shareholder holds unconditional, unilateral authority to dismiss all executive directors and the sitting CEO at any time, with no required consent from other nominal shareholders. The dismissal resolution takes full legal effect the moment it is filed with the State Business Registry. 10 minutes ago, my legal counsel completed all official state business registration change filings. Derek, you are no longer an employee, executive officer, or beneficial shareholder of this company in any capacity. You possess zero decision-making power, zero quarterly dividend rights, zero daily operational authority over any department or project. I have legally terminated every nominee shareholding agreement we executed at the company's founding and reclaimed every single share of corporate equity to register fully under my legal name. Every single word was a final, unbreakable nail hammered into the coffin of Derek's borrowed, artificial success. His throat tightened painfully, his chest searing with unbearable, suffocating grief and panic, his voice trembling with desperate, disbelieving agony. You planned all this from the very start. You've been scheming and plotting against me this entire decade, waiting to destroy my life. Laura looked back directly at him, her dark eyes entirely empty of lingering love, burning hatred, or raw passion, only pure, unburdened relief after a decade of suffocating captivity. I never schemed against you, Derek. I spent 10 years choosing gentle compromise, 10 years holding our fractured household together through every hardship, 10 years swallowing my own ambitions to support your dreams. I am only finally taking back what was legally, financially, and morally mine long before we exchanged wedding vows. It was you and your mother who remained endlessly greedy, entitled, and ungrateful year after year. You treated my selfless financial and emotional devotion as an expected obligation, my endless compromise as a sign of personal weakness, my life-saving financial support as something you were inherently owed simply because we were married. I voluntarily waived my right to pursue standard marital property division during the divorce proceedings, not because I had no assets to claim, but because your family's petty, limited pool of accumulated assets are entirely beneath my notice. I only wanted a clean, permanent break from this rotten, one-sided marriage and the full restoration of my stolen dignity and locked-away capital. The soft, yielding mask of the docile, devoted housewife finally fell away completely from Laura's features. In its place stood a sharp, decisive, powerful woman with unshakable executive authority, no trace of the meek, overlooked spouse the outside world had spent 10 years misjudging entirely. The onlooking crowd erupted in shocked, exhilarated murmurs, dozens of visitors and passers-by raising their smartphones to record the unprecedented public takedown unfolding on the courthouse steps. She's been secretly funding the entire Bennett household and startup this whole time? The big shot CEO's nothing more than a puppet living off his wife's hidden wealth and connections. This is the most satisfying legal reckoning I've ever witnessed in person. A middle-aged woman reclaiming her life with pure financial grit and ironclad legal power, this is absolutely iconic. Driven to utter frenzy by the crowd's whispered judgment and her own crushing personal defeat, Margaret pointed a shaking, wrinkled finger straight at Laura, her face twisted with unhinged rage and resentment. You ungrateful, cold-hearted witch. You're cruel and manipulative down to your bones. You destroyed my son's entire life for petty revenge. I'll fight you to my last breath over this. She lunged forward without hesitation, hands outstretched to scratch Laura's face and snatch the stack of binding legal documents from her grasp, her movements wild, undignified, and openly aggressive in front of dozens of witnesses. Laura sidestepped the attack effortlessly, her posture graceful and unrushed, her gaze cold as frozen winter lake ice. Margaret Bennett, cease your physical assault immediately. Public disturbance, attempted bodily harm, and theft of state-filed legal documents are all criminal misdemeanor offenses under state law. I can direct my legal team to press formal criminal charges against you this instant, leading to fines, a permanent criminal record, and court-ordered short-term detention. The sharp, unflinching legal warning froze Margaret mid-attack, her hands suspended uselessly in the air inches from Laura's suit jacket. She stood rigid in place, seething with unspoken hatred yet far too terrified of legal consequences to make another hostile move, her eyes blazing with helpless, impotent rage and mounting panic. Laura smoothed the faint, wind-ruffled creases from her tailored suit jacket with calm, deliberate, unhurried movements, delivering her final, unyielding verdict to the pair before her. The riverfront penthouse is fully sold to a new buyer. The new owners will take full legal possession of the residence in exactly 3 calendar days. You two will fully vacate the premises with all personal belongings before that deadline arrives. As of today, Derek, you possess no permanent home, no executive job, no corporate equity, no accessible personal assets. Every bit of wealth, social status, and public prestige your family has flaunted for an entire decade has been reduced to absolute zero. The lingering autumn rain evaporated completely overhead, thick golden sunlight breaking through the heavy gray cloud cover to spill warm illumination over the courthouse stone steps. The bright light fully illuminated Laura's tall, upright figure and laid bare every hidden, painful truth of her 10-year suffocating marriage. Derek stood rooted motionless to the pavement, icy dread coursing through every vein in his body as a flood of long-suppressed, buried memories crashed violently over him, tearing apart every false narrative he had spent years convincing himself to believe about his marriage and his so-called self-made success. 10 years prior, 22-year-old Laura had been a top-tier Ivy League finance graduate, holding a prestigious 6-figure investment banking offer from one of Wall Street's most respected firms, possessing independent overseas capital investments built through years of early career success, and holding a limitless, glittering professional future stretched out ahead of her. She had been a genuine financial prodigy, born with rare analytical talent, generational family investment resources, and once-in-a-lifetime professional opportunity. Derek, by stark contrast, had been a recent small state university graduate with a sparse, unimpressive resume, ordinary blue-collar family background, and nothing but unrealistic, half-baked entrepreneurial fantasies with no tangible path to execution. He had stumbled through every early freelance venture, failing repeatedly to secure clients or consistent revenue, with no clear path forward in the competitive tech industry. It was Laura's pure, naive, all-consuming youthful love that made her wholeheartedly believe in his empty verbal promises of a balanced, equal partnership, that made her voluntarily sacrifice her own brilliant banking future to fully support his shaky startup dreams. She turned down her high-paying Wall Street career offer without a second thought, cut off all her independent capital partnership meetings, buried her hard-earned talents and well-documented professional achievements, and locked herself entirely into domesticity to become the invisible, uncredited Mrs. Bennet. She deliberately hid her personal wealth, elite global connections, sharp financial intelligence, and widespread industry influence, solely to protect his fragile male ego. She never boasted of her personal accomplishments in public, never overshadowed his public image at corporate galas and networking events, never let any investor or business associate know he was entirely dependent on his wife's hidden financial power. When he lacked even basic startup operating funds, she anonymously injected multi-million-dollar capital tranches to build his company infrastructure from the ground up. When he lacked high-value industry connections to land major clients, she leveraged her elite overseas investor network to secure exclusive top-tier partnership deals. When his capital chain collapsed and bankruptcy loomed, she drained her personal savings and offshore trust funds to rescue his business single-handedly. When he lacked formal professional management skills or financial planning expertise, she stayed up countless late nights drafting comprehensive business models, optimizing equitable corporate equity structures, and writing polished venture capital financing proposals that Derek would later present to investors as his own original work. Every professional victory, every transformative business breakthrough, every moment of public corporate glory belonged solely to Derek. Every exhausting sacrifice, every sleepless late night, every crushing financial and emotional burden fell solely on Laura's unacknowledged shoulders. And for 10 long, unbroken years, the outside world only saw her as the lazy, ungrateful housewife living passively off her husband's supposed hard-earned success. Her daily suffering extended far beyond unappreciated financial sacrifice. Margaret's toxic, demeaning treatment had begun the very day of their wedding ceremony, before they even moved into the downtown penthouse together. Vain, rigidly patriarchal, and relentlessly cruel for sport, the older woman never once treated Laura with basic human kindness or baseline respect. Laura rose before dawn every single day to cook full 3-course meals, scrub every room of the sprawling penthouse, launder every piece of clothing, and tend to her in-laws' every trivial daily need, working nonstop from early morning until midnight without a single scheduled day of rest. During every holiday gathering, family reunion, and neighborhood social visit, she handled every tedious chore and event preparation entirely alone, yet received zero gratitude, only constant public criticism and deliberate belittlement at the hands of Margaret, who regularly mocked her to visiting relatives specifically to artificially elevate her son's perceived social status. Even when Laura ran a dangerous high fever or fell seriously ill with persistent chronic fatigue, she was forced to continue all household labor without pause, dismissed as overly sensitive and dramatic if she so much as paused to rest for an hour. And through every second of this unrelenting daily abuse and emotional torment, Derek remained a passive, spineless bystander, completely unwilling to defend his wife. He always unconditionally sided with his mother in every argument, always demanded Laura swallow every unfair slight and tolerate unprovoked mistreatment, always dismissed her crippling emotional pain as insignificant overreaction. He happily enjoyed every tangible benefit of her endless domestic labor, her massive hidden wealth, and her consistent financial protection, yet never once cherished or valued her for a single quiet moment. As his corporate career grew more externally successful and his regional social status steadily rose, he grew increasingly arrogant and openly dissatisfied with his quiet, steady wife. He began to resent her calm, domestic quietude, grew tired of her gentle, conflict-avoidant temperament, and started seeking ego validation from younger female administrative staff and external business acquaintances outside their marriage. In the final 3 years of their union, he began coming home late every single night, subjecting her to cold, stonewalling emotional abuse, speaking to her with constant open contempt, and secretly diverting substantial marital income into personal discretionary accounts hidden away from their shared household budget. He allowed his mother's bullying and verbal harassment to escalate unchecked, slowly draining every last ounce of unconditional love and hopeful expectation Laura had once held for their shared future. This marriage had never been a safe, nurturing home for Laura. It had been a decade-long self-made prison of endless self-sacrifice and unrelenting emotional torture. She had finally grown completely numb, exhausted beyond recovery, and fully free of any lingering hope for change. She stopped fighting pointless domestic battles, stopped pleading for basic kindness and consideration, stopped compromising every core part of herself to keep the peace. Instead of creating dramatic public scenes or bitter screaming conflicts that would drag on for years, she chose the calmest, most legally rigorous, and most thorough way possible to end the marital farce and fully reclaim her stolen life. "Why never tell me any of this, Laura?" Derek's voice turned hoarse and broken, genuine, crippling regret finally flickering dimly in his bloodshot eyes as he stared at the woman he had spent 10 years systematically destroying. "If I had known the full truth of everything you did for me, I never would have treated you the way I did." "Never would have what?" Laura cut him off sharply, her tone sharp with unvarnished, scathing truth that cut straight through his fragile self-delusions. "Never would have let your mother verbally and emotionally abuse me daily for a full decade? Never would have taken every single one of my massive financial sacrifices entirely for granted? Never would have grown bitter, resentful, and neglectful toward the only person who ever bailed you out of every professional disaster? Derek, you understood every bit of it on a subconscious level this entire time. You simply chose not to care about my suffering. You saw my quiet pain unfold before your eyes every single day and deliberately ignored it to preserve your own comfort. You needed me as your unbreakable safety net, your unlimited financial backer, your unpaid full-time domestic servant. The second I stopped serving your convenience, you discarded me like disposable household trash without a second thought." Her unflinching words sliced through every thin layer of self-justification he had constructed for himself over the years, laying bare his core hypocrisy and crippling selfishness without mercy or softening. Derek's face blanched an even paler shade, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened, drowning in overwhelming, irreversible regret with zero feasible path to redeem all the harm he had inflicted. Still stubbornly refusing to accept personal responsibility for any of the years of mistreatment, Margaret spluttered in desperate, self-serving defense, her voice shrill and unsteady. Even if you funded everything for the company and the house, a wife's natural, inherent job is to unconditionally support her husband's career and household. You're just bitter and manipulative, hiding your vast wealth for years solely to plot this brutal revenge against our family. Laura had exhausted all remaining patience for her petty, blind denial, her tone cold and permanently final, leaving no room for further pointless argument. First, all my assets, professional abilities, and elite global connections were earned entirely before our marriage, fully independent of your family's limited resources or minor contributions to our household. My financial support over 10 years was a voluntary choice born out of misplaced love and hope, not a legal or moral obligation. Taking back what legally belongs to me is my absolute right. Second, I stayed hidden, humble, and accommodating for 10 full years solely to protect our fragile marriage and preserve your son's fragile public dignity. It was the two of you, mother and son together, who trampled every small act of my kindness and exhausted every last drop of my patience and goodwill over time. Third, from this exact moment forward, I am completely and permanently severed from every member of the Bennett family. No lingering emotional ties, no unresolved financial debts, no remaining social or legal connections of any kind will ever exist between us again. Before Derek or Margaret could process the total, irreversible collapse of every fragment of their comfortable, privileged lives, Laura's smartphone vibrated steadily and repeatedly in her small leather handbag. A rapid series of synchronized real-time text updates arrived from her elite, high-profile legal team and dedicated capital operation team, signaling the official launch of a comprehensive, relentless final financial reckoning against Derek's accumulated assets. Laura glanced briefly down at the illuminated screen for 3 quiet seconds, her facial expression remaining perfectly calm, collected, and unchanging without a single flicker of triumph or malice. "Updates from my legal and financial teams just landed," she said flatly, lifting her gaze back to the devastated pair standing before her. "Let me walk you through the next unavoidable consequences of every financial benefit I provided you over the past decade. First, every historical quarterly dividend, executive base salary, annual performance bonus, and corporate profit share you receive from future tech innovations over 10 years originated entirely from my personal capital investment pool. I have formally initiated a full marital asset trace and legal recovery proceeding. Every dollar you earn through the company will be fully frozen, audited, and legally reclaimed back to my personal trust accounts. Second, every personal checking account, premium credit card line, and private investment portfolio you utilize for daily personal spending was initially funded through my authorized capital transfers to support your household and social lifestyle. All of these financial accounts have now been fully locked by court-ordered temporary asset freeze, set to accept incoming deposits only, with all outgoing expenditures permanently blocked until the full asset audit concludes. Third, every industry partnership, venture capital investor contact, exclusive supplier channel, and high-level institutional business endorsement you have leveraged to grow Future Tech's market reach was originally sourced, negotiated, and authorized by me at the company's founding. I have just distributed formal written termination notices to every single one of these professional connections. All active business cooperation will terminate effective immediately, and all exclusive resource access channels will be fully and permanently severed with no possibility of future reinstatement. Each consequence, she outlined targeted Derek's core survival lifelines with pinpoint, surgical precision, striking at the very foundations of his fabricated, wealthy, successful identity. Derek's entire frame trembled violently as the full weight of her words sank into his mind, stripped of every last shred of false confidence. He could no longer maintain any trace of polished elite composure, his voice breaking into messy, panicked fragments of desperate protest. "Freeze my income, reclaim all my earnings, cut off every business contact. Laura, you cannot legally do this to me. I put in years of grueling daily labor building this company. All that money is rightfully mine for the work I poured in. Your so-called grueling labor? Laura let out another cold, dismissive scoff, her eyes sharp with unmasked skepticism. All you ever did was stand atop the fully constructed financial and operational platform I built single-handedly to passively collect financial dividends and public praise. Without my unlimited capital safety net, exclusive industry resource support, and foundational business framework pre-built for you, you would have collapsed into bankruptcy within the company's first operating year. Corporate and marital law rely solely on verifiable capital source trails, formal equity ownership contracts, and written legal agreements, not vague claims of hard work without foundational investment backing. Every dollar of your 10 years of personal income was generated through a corporate structure funded exclusively with my personal wealth. Full asset tracing will confirm every cent traces back to my premarital investment capital with no independent personal financial contribution from you at any stage. This was the core, realistic backbone of Laura's entire counterattack strategy, the element that resonated most deeply with mature Western readers craving grounded, logical justice over hollow emotional revenge. Every step of her pushback relied entirely on binding legal contracts, verifiable financial paper trails, formal corporate statutes, and state property law. No empty emotional manipulation, no baseless moral shaming, only airtight legal and financial leverage applied fairly to recover. Stolen assets. The surrounding crowd erupted into loud, approving murmurs of overwhelming satisfaction, dozens of onlookers nodding vigorously in agreement with Laura's measured, legally sound approach to reclaiming her property and capital. This is exactly how every exploited housewife should fight back, with lawyers, contracts, and cold hard financial evidence, not screaming matches. No cheap fantasy magic, just solid legal strategy and long-term careful planning. This hits so much harder. After 10 years of being walked all over, she's taking every single stolen resource back without wasting a single tear on them. Margaret absorbed the full scope of Laura's multi-layered financial retaliation, and her legs buckled completely beneath her weight. She crumpled down hard onto the cold concrete courthouse steps, her expensive tailored slacks scraping against the rough stone pavement, all prior loud arrogance evaporating into utter hopeless despair. She had spent decades obsessed with material wealth, social status, and superficial neighborhood bragging rights, leaning entirely on her son's manufactured corporate success to elevate her own social standing among local peers. She had hosted endless lavish dinner parties, bought overpriced designer clothing, and vacationed at luxury beach resorts entirely funded by Laura's hidden investment capital, all while sneering openly at her daughter-in-law as a useless, unproductive housewife dependent on her son's generosity. In a single morning, every source of her bragging power vanished entirely. Her son lost his executive title, all corporate equity, his lavish riverfront penthouse residence, full access to personal spending funds, and every professional business connection that sustained their privileged lifestyle. Everything the Bennett family had flaunted as their hard-earned legacy collapsed into total, irreversible ruin. "We've lost everything, every single thing," Margaret whispered hollowly, staring blankly at the asphalt beneath her feet, tears streaking down her wrinkled cheeks. "The house, the business, all our money, the Bennett name is nothing now." Derek's gaze locked onto Laura's unyielding figure, a ridiculous, pathetic flicker of foolish, desperate hope reigniting deep within his shattered chest. He abandoned every ounce of his cultivated executive pride in an instant, stepping forward with his shoulders hunched and his voice reduced to soft, humble begging. "Laura, I see every mistake I've made now. I've spent the entire night replaying every terrible thing I said and did to you over 10 years, and I'm drowning in unending regret. Let's drop the divorce filing entirely. Let's start our marriage over fresh. I promise I will never side with my mother against you again, never raise my voice to you in anger, never dismiss all the sacrifices you've quietly made for our family. Give me one single chance to spend the rest of my life making up for every bit of pain I've caused you. I can surrender every asset I ever claimed as mine, walk away from the company entirely, live a modest, simple life with nothing. All I need is you back by my side, Laura. Please, give me one last shot." His desperate plea laid bare his core, unchanging selfishness, a truth Laura recognized instantly without hesitation. He did not mourn the loss of her companionship, her quiet kindness, or the genuine emotional bond they once shared in their early marriage. He mourned the loss of the unlimited financial safety net, unearned social prestige, and free domestic labor she had provided him for a full decade. Without her capital and connections, he had no foundation to sustain the privileged lifestyle he had grown addicted to over 10 years. Laura's expression held zero softening, no flicker of lingering fondness or temptation to reconsider her permanent choice. Her gaze remained distant, entirely alien, as if she looked upon a complete stranger rather than the man she had once loved wholeheartedly in her youth. "Derek, you do not regret losing me as a person. You only regret losing the unlimited wealth, social prestige, and comfortable lifestyle my resources provided you without effort." A single sentence sliced clean through every layer of his performative remorse, laying bare his hollow, transactional motivation without mercy. Derek's face turned ashen, and he rushed forward to frantically argue his case, hands raised in a pleading gesture. "That's not true at all. I truly loved you once, and I still love you now. This regret comes straight from my heart, not fear of losing money and status. There is no need for empty declarations of love or promises of future amends." Laura cut him off without pause, her tone cold, unwavering, and permanently final. "I poured the brightest decade of my youth, my purest unselfish love, and every ounce of my unreserved financial support into you and your mother's household for 10 straight years. Every last trace of that love has been completely drained dry, every bit of gentle patience worn thin beyond repair, every small hopeful expectation for our shared future fully crushed into dust. I have no desire left to accept your belated apologies, entertain your empty promises of change, or revisit the suffocating, one-sided marriage we shared. The single greatest stroke of luck I have experienced in 42 years of life was finally waking up, cutting every tie to you, and permanently stepping away from a relationship that consumed every part of my identity for a decade. The wealth, social status, and corporate power I once handed to you freely for 10 years is mine by legal right to reclaim. I will take back every asset I created without hesitation, and there is nothing you can say or do to reverse this outcome. From this moment onward, our paths diverge permanently with no further intersection. You will live out the modest, difficult life your own selfish choices have earned you, and I will climb steadily toward the independent, unburdened future I am finally free to build entirely for myself." Every word she spoke carried unshakable resolve, no trace of indecision, no fleeting urge to soften out of misplaced pity, the exact uncompromising independence mature Western female readers craved as cathartic closure. No foolish emotional backtracking, no drawn-out tangled reconciliation arcs, only clear, permanent separation and unapologetic self-focus. Derek stared deep into her ice-cold, unforgiving eyes, and the last faint flicker of desperate hope inside his chest extinguished entirely. He understood, beyond all remaining doubt, that he had lost her completely and irreversibly. The soft, accommodating woman who once prioritized every single one of his needs above her own happiness would never return to him, not for any apology, plea, or promise of future change. Laura paid no further attention to his crumpled, devastated figure or Margaret's tearful, hysterical whimpers from the concrete steps. She turned away from the pair entirely, raising one hand to flag down a waiting black luxury executive van parked along the courthouse curb. The rear passenger door slid open silently, and a crisply dressed professional female personal assistant stepped out onto the pavement, bowing her head slightly in a gesture of full deference to Laura. "Ms. Bennett, all legal filings, equity recovery paperwork, and asset sale closing documents have been fully processed and logged by the county clerk's office as scheduled. Your entire executive team is assembled and waiting for you back at the downtown financial district headquarters for the afternoon strategy briefing." A single formal honorific, "Ms. Bennett," addressed with the quiet respect reserved for a powerful CEO and hidden investment tycoon, rippled a fresh wave of shocked murmurs through the surrounding crowd, cementing every spectator's realization that the quiet stay-at-home wife they had watched for years was in truth a powerful, reclusive capital magnate operating entirely behind closed doors. Laura offered her assistant a faint, calm nod, her voice steady and authoritative without excess emotion. "Drive me back to the corporate headquarters, downtown immediately." She stepped smoothly into the spacious leather passenger seat of the executive van without glancing backward at Derek and Margaret one final time. Before the vehicle's automatic door slid closed entirely, she cast one last quiet glance over her shoulder toward the two broken figures on the courthouse steps, delivering a final binding ultimatum that locked in their irreversible fate and set a gripping serialized cliffhanger for future chapters. "Derek, Margaret, you have exactly 3 full days to remove every single personal possession from the riverfront penthouse before the new owners take possession. If you choose to illegally occupy the property past the deadline, my legal team will initiate formal court-ordered eviction proceedings with full law enforcement support and pursue all civil damages allowed under state trespass law."